Welcome to Ask Becky Anything. Hi, and welcome to Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I'm an independent financial advisor and wealth coach. I'm the director of Evolution Financial Planning, who is also our sponsor for today's show. We have a question.
Hi. Okay, here's a question for you from an entrepreneur who is not a huge fan of forward planning or numbers, let's say. So as someone who's been self-employed for over 20 years, pension has not been at the top of my list. And I do feel very silly to admit the fact that I don't really have things in place. So I've looked at different pieces of advice, and I actually have found it to be quite conflicting. Some people have said it's pointless at this point to invest in a traditional pension. You should be putting your money in stocks and shares. You should invest in property. Your business, your exit plan is your pension. What are your thoughts on this?
Great question. And that is from Jo Swan at Chocolate PR, who runs an amazing PR agency. Great question. And first of all, Jo, don't beat yourself up about this. Don't feel silly. It is really, really usual and normal for people to procrastinate, put things off and worry and wonder if they should have done something sooner. It's always best to take small baby step actions as quickly as you can. So try not to put it off for years and years and give yourself a date that you're going to take action by. But to answer your question, the first thing I want to bring up is business exit strategy. So for a lot of business owners, when I say to them, why didn't you have done a pension, or would you look at doing a pension? They say, oh no, don't need one. My business is my pension plan. Now, there's two things to that. There's one big question is, okay, what's it going to be worth, and is that enough? And secondly, actually, a lot of businesses aren't designed or built to be sold. So if you had an asset that the business is bought through profits, like a property, then that's okay. Yes, I'll take that as a fair point. You could sell that asset. Now, that example, property can take a while. If we're in a sort of a slow property market, you don't know what you're going to get for that property, and you don't know how long it's going to take to sell it. It might take a couple of years in some examples. If it's a large property, if it's a large factory or a large estate, for example, or a large 5-bedroom house, a higher end of the market, they take longer to sell. But in terms of traditional businesses, most that I come across, they're not buying assets in that way. They're one-man bands or small teams, might have up to maybe 10 employed staff as a maximum, and they're often renting hired space of office space. And their assets that they're building, apart from their marketing assets and their brand as a general, is the only thing that they have as an asset. The business might be named as themselves, and there is actually, from someone buying that business, there is sometimes not very much assets that they can actually pass on, apart from the profitability. The business has been running profitable, but sometimes that can be quite hard to equate as to what that business is valued. So again, then how much is enough? Is that going to be enough? Are you going to be able to sell it for enough money? Businesses like financial advisors and like accountants, we take on paying clients contractually, and then we have an ongoing, usually yearly, ongoing long-term relationship. So we can quite relatively easy, roughly value our businesses and say, I could sell this business for X in number of a years' time if we carry on growing or carry on going at a certain rate. But for most people, they're not building a business with an exit strategy even in mind in the first place. So unless you have, and you know what those figures are, then I'll take that as a fair point. But unfortunately, we don't always know exactly what that's going to equate to. So I do have a financial service business, and I will be able to sell it for a certain amount, but I'm also putting into my pension because I won't just rely on that. I don't know what regulatory changes, market changes, or what could happen in the industry that could create some sort of problem for me selling that in the future. So I'd still do both. The other point that was made is, well, you might as well buy a property. Well, that's a bit of an interesting point, because yes, you can, but you should always have a diverse portfolio, never relying on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 properties. When you're buying property as an asset, generally most people, unless they're serial property developers and that's all they do day in and day out, most individuals, normal everyday people, might have a maximum of 3, maybe 4 properties. You've only got to have one of those properties fall through and already a third or a quarter of your income stops overnight. And it could be costing you a lot of money. You might have a boiler break and you've got to pay for it. You might have a lease change and you've got to pay for it. So it does become quite can be an expensive relatively amount of income that's coming in that can be stopped. And again, there's too many unknown quantities with that. Again, it's good to have diversity and maybe use some of the profits that you're making to reinvest and put those back into pensions so that you're not just investing in property, you've got other assets that are creating income from you. The other point with that is actually you can convert a SAS pension, so that's like a pension that you can buy commercial property through, into a standard pension and vice versa. So actually pensions and property at times can go together. There are some business owners who create second limited companies and they use those limited companies to build property portfolios, lending money from other businesses to go into that limited company. So again, it's about diversifying your assets. So there's not always, and this is where Joe mentions, I've had mixed advice. That's because that mixed advice will be coming from individual people where they've done personally individual certain things themselves. This is why getting independent financial advice is really important, because you're going to get advice from a perspective from somebody that will understand your personal circumstances and guide you in the best way forward. The other point was stocks and shares. So a pension is investing in stocks and shares. It's just that you're using a tax wrapper with certain tax benefits with it. But you can manage that yourself if you wanted to and buy individually in stocks and shares, or you can have it through funds, or you can have it which are invested in stocks, or you could have it managed by a fund manager, and you can also get regulated financial advice through someone like myself, like an advisor, that can help you manage those pension pots. But effectively, it's managed in the stock market in the same kind of context in terms of assets, ensuring that obviously that they're diverse and they're not just in the UK FTSE 100, for example, that they're spread out and done in the right way. So the advice that you've been given, or you might as well just invest in the stock market, is a bit of a moot point, because you're technically investing in the stock market anyway, but you're doing it within a certain tax wrapper. Those tax wrappers benefit you based on your financial position. So Joe's asking me, as a business owner, you can take profits from your limited company into a personal pension plan, and as long as it's a qualifying scheme and there's profits within the company that allow it, that can then reduce your corporation tax, which will then effectively save you money, and the money's then invested in a wrapper that's in your own name. There's tax benefits to pensions as well. So when you get to age 57, you can access that money and take 25% tax-free lump sum. Unfortunately, Rachel Reeves has played around with the inheritance tax rules. And sorry, it's 58. But when you, from 2027, that's where the 7 came in, there's tax rules are changing around inheritance tax for pensions. But that's why it's good to have a financial advisor on board, because we can help you navigate those changes in legislation as and when it applies to you. So I think that covers everything, Joe. So the best place to start when it comes to getting a pension is to set up a scheme. You can get regulated financial advice if you wish to, but you can go to an online provider or your bank and set up a pension and just start somewhere, even if it's only paying in £50 a month. And then you set a date for 6 months' time to review how it's done, how it's been invested, and start to understand how the stock market works, how those investments work. But be very careful if you are learning around online courses, because some online courses that teach investing can be very swayed to a certain way of investing. So it's really important to have a read up on the different ways to invest. I hope that helps and answers your question. If you're somebody that is not sure what to do with their finances, maybe you're working and you're not sure what to do with the bonuses you've got at work, or maybe you started a business and you've got profits and you're not sure what you should be doing to enable you to A, pay yourself more, or B, potentially retire earlier. Maybe you're somebody that's thinking about, do I overpay on the mortgage? You've received some inheritance. You've got lots of questions around your finances and what to do next. then check out Evolution Financial Planning, who are regulated independent financial advisors and financial planners that can help you make some of those big decisions in life. Next question.
Hi Becky, thank you for this. I'm Kerry and I would like a bit of advice on savings, how to make them work better. I've currently got all of my savings in a high street building society ISA, 3% interest. And I'm wondering, I have a basic working knowledge of shares in companies, etc. Would I be better off even moving some of that money out and being brave, as I see it, and investing in shares more than leaving it there? I feel like the money's not really working that well for me, although I appreciate 3% isn't bad. Thank you very much. Sorry if you can hear any wind. I'm out in the elements. Thank you.
I think it sounded really great. Thanks, Kerry. Great question as well. So, a lot of people and a lot of women generally sit on cash. And in the last few years, with the turbulence that we've seen with Donald Trump, the Ukraine war, Liz Truss, the government stuff that they're doing at the moment, so much going on, it does make people go, oh, panic, not going to invest in the stock market. I'm going to keep it in savings. And yeah, 3% is not bad. It's keeping up with inflation, but it's not maximising or growing your money. Now, you should never invest money that you can afford or can't afford, I should say, to lose. Okay, so if you have, for example, £20,000 and it's your life savings, and you are worried about, you might lose your job, or you need to get a new car, and you just know that you just really need that money, then you should never take all of that money and invest it all in the stock market. And that's what people are nervous about, because there are so many risk warnings. Your money is at risk and the stock market does go up and down. However, if you look at like a diverse portfolio over 100 years and you saw a graph, it would generally go in this direction. And on average, you can see returns from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, depending on what level of risk you want to take. It's not guaranteed. Timing the market is important. So if when you invest and then the market tanks, obviously no one's got a crystal ball. But that is plays into the element of how well things can do. But actually what people should be doing really more closely is just starting somewhere and allowing time in the market for the money to grow. So it's also important to allow the money that you're going to shift from savings into investing to basically say, I don't need that money for 5 years. Like I can afford to lose some of it, not all of it, but I can afford to maybe lose 10, 20, 30, 40%. And I, if necessary, I'm willing to take that level of risk. And there's different levels of risk. It's not just one level of risk. But I don't need it for the next 5 years. And that is where you start shifting from being a saver to an investor. So where do you start with that? Now, obviously, you can get financial advice. There are financial advisors that have a minimum level of investment. So if you're only talking 5, 10, 20,000, that can be tricky. Financial advisors in my firm and myself, we do charge a fixed fee for regulated financial advice, and there is no minimum amount. However, for the amount of time that we're doing things, it still can be too much. We're talking more than just a couple of £100. It can be too much for the amount of money the person wants to invest, because effectively it's almost eating up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years worth of profits, depending on the amounts. So there are people that would like to get financial advice, but they are sort of, even with people like myself helping and doing what we can, cornered out of the market because they're wanting to start smaller, which I understand. So the best advice I can give on this, and I have to be quite careful because I am a regulated financial advisor, is to start where you know. So start with your bank, start with a platform that you already know, you already like them, you already trust them, you've already worked with them, and give them 6 months. It doesn't have to stay there forever. And you can do some reading up around different investment strategies and just start with a small amount. So if you were thinking about, I'm going to invest £5,000 or £1,000, just take a third of that. Just start smaller than that and use that money as a bit of a test in the water. I generally find that once people have done this for a year, maybe 2 years, they get the confidence, and then they're more likely to go to a financial advisor and say, right, I'm ready now to put more skin in the game. But it requires that initial sort of putting your toe in the water and being brave, but you don't have to go all in to the extent maybe, Kerry, you were thinking. I would start smaller. There's a couple of things you need to consider when you're choosing different investment strategies. And the first thing is the platform. So the platform that holds the money. So let's just say it's your bank, a building society, a bank, and they will charge you for their platform access. They will charge you 0.4, 0.5%. So whatever returns you're getting, it becomes from a gross amount to a net amount. So it's eating into those profits, right? But it doesn't matter what level of profits you get, they still take their fixed fee, okay? Then you have the funds or the underlying fund charges or management charges, ongoing charges. It depends on the terminology of how the investment platform works. And how you're investing the money. There's different degrees from 0.1 up to 0.8 or 1%. It does depend on the type of strategy and the platform that you're going to use. So it's looking at those overall charges and understanding exactly what you're getting for your money, so you know how the money is invested. And they're really one of the main key points. You could be putting this money in and trusting it's going to work, and then 6 months later it's not really done what you'd expected it to. But if it does, that is the case, don't panic, because you've not invested a big amount, you've dipped your toe in the water, and you then learn from that. You've seen that as like a training program, and that is why you mustn't invest money that you can't afford to. Just say, okay, well, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, sleeping at night, that we don't know which way this is going to go. Now, obviously, when you work with a financial advisor, they're guiding you through these elements. They're explaining what the charges are. They're giving you the best advice in terms of the most effective charges, the best way to invest the money. They explain what the strategies are and why they're going down that particular road, which is why you're paying for that. It's giving you a degree of security and peace of mind that you don't get when you're doing it on your own. So I hope that answers your question, Kerry, and good luck. I hope you will, maybe you feel more comfortable staying in savings, but for the longer term, not the short term, to maximise that money, then maybe you'll make some decisions about moving forward with investing. So good luck. So thank you for your questions from Ask Becky Anything. I'll be back again with another show and segment. Do send us your questions in. We'd love to hear from you. Take care. Thank you for joining us today at Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do subscribe and let us know in the comments any of your thoughts.